So you can't neglect the dumb butt luck that happens to all of us. There's this sort of message that is often propagated, and it frustrates the bananas out of me because um, there's a sort of story where people say, like, I made it, and so can you. And why can't you just do it this way? And it's easy to sort of see how to actually do that particular path where you should do it in this certain way because I actually made it. What this doesn't realize, though, when people say those particular things, they don't realize is that there's a lot of dumb butt luck that's actually involved in all of our lives, right? Like there is so much stupid luck. Um, the genetics that we have in our brains and our bodies in terms of how it's sort of set up, um, the people that you bump into, the parents that you're born into, the country that you're born, like all these kind of things, it's all just dumb butt luck. And transferring from one person's experience to another is actually a really poor way of learning. We do this though. That's kind of natural. As we look at other people, it's called social learning. And you look at other people and you try to make sense of what they're doing by mimicking what they're doing. And then people might sort of transfer knowledge to you and say, this is how you're supposed to do it. And this is the way that I did it. It's called transferring best practices. But when you actually go to do it, you realize like that doesn't apply, right? Like most of the time you're like, this is dumb. Why am I following what somebody else has done when it clearly does not apply? Their circumstances not the same way. I see this a lot um with with I don't want to out anybody, but like, people that are at like fluting universities. And, I am part of one of them, right? Like, I would sort of suggest that I'm part of the problem as well. Um, where people saying, well, you just have to do it in this particular way. And then voila, everything's going to work out for you, right? Like, and that is kind of the messaging and even the academic literature that I read all of the time, because I read about, I read about success. That's my job. That's actually the definition of the field that I read is how do we create business success essentially, at various different levels. And it's frustrating because I read it and I think all of this stuff is not representative. The data that we gather is often from very successful firms, like a whole bunch of stuff. There's a whole bunch of reasons. Let's just say that it doesn't apply universally. And we draw from these lessons and we draw often these sort of best practice lessons that do not apply. So what can you do though, right? Like you might be listening to this and getting frustrated. It's like, yeah, like I'm not going to be able to succeed. I can't garner any sort of knowledge. So the thing that you can do from paying attention to other people is just the knowledge that somebody else has moved the lever, right? Like has moved and has pushed the boundary that demonstrates that it could be done, right? Understanding that your situation is completely different and it will likely take much more longer, much more shorter, much more work, much maybe even less work. But there's a tremendous amount of sort of happenstance and chance along the way where people give you breaks that they shouldn't give you breaks. Um, that they see something in you that was probably false to begin with. Um, that they misinterpret what's going on, and by happenstance, you get a positive outcome from this particular thing rather than a negative outcome. And vice versa, the opposite can happen. But, what I'm trying to say is that knowing that, yes, your situation is completely and you might be in a completely different country right now. I'm a Canadian that immigrated to the United States, I don't know how long that will last given everything that's going on in the news, but, um, um, the you might be in a completely different country, right? Like some place that I don't even know and I've never been to. Let's just pick one. Eh, uh, eh, you know, Cuba, for example. I mean, I've never really been there. I've seen pictures. It looks beautiful. It's got a great culture. But you might be listening to this, and you might be thinking, well, like, how does his life apply to mine? It doesn't, right? Like nothing. And you might be female. You might have a different skin color than me. And none of that actually matters to you, right? And you probably shouldn't be paying attention to any of that and sort of interpreting it. But what you can see and interpret is saying, oh, he's been able to do this, this, and this. I know it is possible. The way that I actually get there, the way that I do it is going to be different. And I'm going to actually try and set my sights on actually trying to get there, to do something that's different, to pursue it. And I'm going to garner information from other sources that actually make more sense. Right. And that's where instead of, and I think this is a message that is frustrating. And this happens a lot on, all sorts of spectrums that you look at. But people have this belief that, you either need a handout or you either need or you can't get there. Right. Like there is these barriers that are preventing you from getting there. And there's truth to all of that, right? Like that there is rationale being well-intentioned to give handouts and all that kind of stuff. There is truth to that. And in fact, I I am of bleeding heart by personality, so I default to that. But I also understand, and it frustrates me when people do get handouts because of the fact that they sort of perceive barriers, right? Um, so you know, all you can do is to be as positive as possible and know that it's just one step of the other after the other. And what I'm going to encourage you to do is to not lose faith. Right? Like your story, you may be in a situation, and I hope that there's somebody maybe living on the streets of Cuba right now, and they're listening to this. In their situations, like, I don't know, he is so different than me. But my message is like to get back up and to stay positive that you're going to get out there and try something and repeatedly do it day in, day out, repeatedly, because your your story is different. You may not have any of the same experiences that I do, but I know that there is one thing that actually does pretty well work. There's pretty good evidence of this. I haven't seen anything that is like, yeah, I don't necessarily believe this. Um, and it's true across so many different domains. In fact, I'd almost call it a law at this point. It's that repetition, doing the same thing over again, remaining positive. I mean, that part's not part of it, but, repeating over and over and over and over and over again gets you better at something. And that repeating over and over and over again allows you to see opportunities. And what you do improves, what you do gets a little bit better. Um, and all of that, right? It's called the learning curve. And it's basically this general idea that just experience makes you a little bit better. With all of that, or progress curve is another name. With all of that, it means that, so first of all, it's under the assumption that you will repeat, right? That's where I want you to stay optimistic. know that your situation's different, but if you repeat, I can't guarantee complete success, right? Like you're going to make a whole bunch of money or whatever, like any of that kind of stuff, but you will get better. You will see other opportunities that may come your way, but it's all about maintaining a sense of delusional optimism. That's often what we sort of say about entrepreneurs is that they're delusional. Nothing about it makes sense. And there's this sort of delusional fancy word is hubris, like self-confidence that is just false, um, where you get back up and you do it again. And that is the only thing I know that works in almost all situations. It's getting back up and doing it again. And it's painful. It sucks. I don't like doing that. Getting up and repeating at something, making a lot of mistakes, being embarrassed, all that kind of stuff. I don't like it. I just physically do not like it. But I know that if I get back up and do it again, something happens. That something, maybe it's a little bit better and you're getting more precision. Maybe it allows you to do something else longer that will allow you to tap into something. So, perfect example of this, the reason why I exercise, I swim, you know, walk, whatever, is not because I'm going to ever be an Olympian. That's nuts. That's crazy talk. But it's because it gives me more time in an ideal world with luck and, randomness and a little bit more time. And maybe it tacks on an extra year or two of my life that allows me to pursue stuff. And it's not to preclude that there isn't a more wonderful world on the other side. I don't know. We don't know, but there may be another wonderful world once we die. Um, but at this moment, keeping going seems like the best option, given we don't know what will happen on the other side. And the only way I know how to keep going, the only way I know what to actually do, or the fact that I'm going to take one more step is to try to remain positive, to look at the world and say, I'm going to take this step today. And to know that, yes, my situation is probably far worse than many other people, but it's also far better than many other people. And how I got here and how they got there was predominantly dominated by luck and stupidity and things that are completely unfair and all of that. But I get back up and I do it again. And that's the only thing I actually know that works. All right. Take care and have a wonderful day.